All right, well, we're going to start today's panel. We're just making sure that Dawn can join us. Hopefully she'll be able to, but I couldn't be more pleased to have this panel today. I'm a bit starstruck, I have to say, with all of our panelists. I can't believe that we have managed to get this panel together with such generosity from our panelists to really share information and really ultimately empower educators all over the nation to know what the situation is with ESSER. How can they get involved? Start to demystify things, because ESSER is a landmark funding opening and an opportunity, but also one which has been communicated quite rapidly, one that needs to be acted on with some speed, but we'll discover where the flexibility is. And awesome, we've got Dawn joining. Great to have you with us, Dawn. Oh, you're on mute. Just make sure to unmute yourself. Awesome. I'll just continue, and really what we're here for today is to have a discussion, to share knowledge, and to make sure that we share as many frameworks and things that you as an attendee can act on after this session. Don't worry if all of your questions aren't answered during this panel session, which will last approximately 45 minutes. There will be a Q&A session afterwards where you'll be able to ask your questions directly to some of our panelists. And afterwards, still, if you feel that some of your questions and you're still curious if some of your questions haven't been answered, feel free to email us. My colleague Ashley at samlabs.com will be only too happy to answer any questions that you may have. So thanks again to all of our panel to be here. We've got Anthony Owen, who's the Arkansas Director of Computer Science Education. We've got Susan Fuhrman, who's President Emerita at Teachers College Columbia, at Columbia University, sorry, and formerly Dean of the Graduate School of Education at University of Pennsylvania. Briana Castano, who's the National Director of STEM at Teach for America. Sherita Hayes, who's the Instructional Supervisor at Oxford City School. And then we've got Don Morrison, who's the Computer Science Education Administrator at Alabama, the Alabama State Department of Education. I would love for you to quickly introduce yourself in any order that you wish, and I will use the popcorn game to do so. I'll just popcorn to someone else to quickly introduce themselves, and then we'll go directly into the questions. So I will popcorn directly to Anthony.
Well, thank you, but I was going to say ladies first. I was just typing it out in chat, but I will, since you called on me, I will jump in there. So anyway, Anthony Owens, State Director of Computer Science, and just happy to be here, happy to share what knowledge I have about this subject. Obviously, mine's going to be focused a lot from a top-down model from a state perspective, but I am prepared to share some of the information that we have regarding how some schools are looking at the use of this funding, and just proud to be on this call. I'm proud to see some of my good friends out there like Dawn that we worked with in the past. So with that, I'll toss it over to Dawn.
Thank you so much, Anthony. It's always good to see my dear friend from Arkansas, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you all to Sam Lab for the invite. Again, my name is Dawn Morrison. I serve as the Computer Science State Administrator for the state of Alabama. I've been a key collaborator on this work regarding our expansion efforts for over a decade. And some of my professional interests just include data-driven quality improvement, education equity, information literacy, and curriculum development. And again, just happy to be here. Thank you so much. Off to the next panelist.
You get to choose.
Let's go with Susan.
Susan Fuhrman. My professional interests center on education policy, implementation particularly, and very recently I've become interested in the effectiveness of education technology.
Susan, you get to choose who gets to go next between Briana and Sherita.
Okay, Briana.
Hi, everyone. I am Briana Castano. I am the National Director of STEM with Teach for America, and my personal interests with education lie in educational equity, particularly when it comes to access and equality STEM education, and also really interested in community teaching and what role the community plays in educating our students. I'm also based in Austin, Texas, so I see a strong Texas representation in the chat and just wanted to shout that out. And I will pass it to Sherita.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sherita Hayes from Oxford, Alabama, Instructional Supervisor here at Oxford City Schools. I work primarily at Oxford High School as a building level administrator. I also work throughout the district with K-12 STEM, also state assessment, and I also am a trainer for A+ College Ready for elementary computer science and middle school computer science.
Thank you very much for all the panelists for your introductions. And the way this panel will proceed, we'll ask one question to one panelist, and then I'll invite the rest of the panelists to give their opinion if they so wish. And then we'll end with one question to all the panelists to share with the rest of the attendees. And it sounds like a great time to start. We've now surpassed 100 participants, so really great to have you all with us. I'll direct the first question to Sherita. Sherita, in your opinion, what are your thoughts on how these funds should be utilized by LEAs?
Yes, I can really think of 3 primary focus areas. And number 1 has to be human resources, because in this trying time, being able to respond to our students' needs, it is going to take a lot of collaboration. Being able to fund human resources from administrators, even teachers, number 1, teachers, to be able to collaborate and really put our heads together. One thing that I always like to talk about is John Hattie's work on collective efficacy, and all of us working together. We know that that has a huge effect size. And also being able to use, from human resources standpoint, reaching out to social workers to address SEL concerns with social emotional learning. There is a huge need there, and also possibly behavioral analysts. Number 2, my assessment background and understanding, definitely formative assessment. I think it's important for us to have a balanced assessment system to, number 1, identify the needs of students. Not only just an assessment system, but one that comes with very rich reports that are going to pinpoint the exact needs of our students. And then following that are high quality, evidence-based, research-based instructional resources, so that when we have the human resources, so that we can really collaborate, we've identified students' individual needs, then we have in our labs, we have the resources to be able to respond to that and just continuously progress monitoring the work that we're doing to make sure that we are meeting the needs of our students, because they're going to be wide and they're going to be varied. So those things all coming together will definitely have a huge impact on how we respond to the needs that we are experiencing in this time.
You mentioned the wide and varied needs of the students. Anything from that you may have experienced that you think also through the COVID times that you think was an opportunity to realize and that can now be acted on with this additional funding?
Yes, exactly. And from an academic standpoint, some early research is showing that students are kind of maintaining in the area of reading and literacy. Here in Oxford High School specifically, we've actually seen growth from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. Number 1, utilizing our human resources and collaborating with one another. We're fortunate enough to see some growth in math at this high school, but not as significant in reading. And national studies are showing that math is seen, that they've greatly impacted in this COVID era. So I would definitely say math. A couple of ways to use those human resources and to address the academic needs in math is being able to provide very targeted intervention in math. So if we have those additional human resources, teachers who can actually use instructional resources like math intervention programs to respond, I think that is a great way. So we are definitely seeing needs in math. And obviously just the social emotional needs, especially if you've been in a virtual environment. A lot of people have kind of somewhat dropped off the map, but having those additional resources like social workers or behavioral analysts will allow us to really target in on those students.
Thank you, Sherita. I'd love to invite the rest of the panel please, Susan.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Sherita about the idea of investing in human resources when this is an infusion of money that we don't know will be sustained over time. So how are you thinking about that?
So definitely of the summertime, some immediate things to look for summer. So obviously being able to have more extensive personnel available during the summertime so that you can really have smaller groups. Also, I would have to say to address the compensation needs of teachers to being able to give up their summer to be able to provide that support. So I definitely think that, and I think even if it is for 1 year, I think the impact that can come from just having a year or 2 years worth of funding to fund some additional people, I think it's worth it to even go it for the time that we have it.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Sherita. I'll move to our next question for Don. Don, what are some do's and don'ts for utilizing these funds effectively, in your opinion and experience?
So let me just start with the don't. I would suggest to everyone participating in our webinar today is that don't squander this opportunity. We have seen probably the largest injection in elementary and secondary education that many of us will see in our lifetime. I mean, to the tune of total, when you combine ESSER 2 and 3 funds together, more than 176 billion with the B dollars. So please do not squander this opportunity. That's certainly my don't. But in terms of do, where do we make the investments? I would certainly, have to say that, the sudden, transition to distance learning, for millions of students across this country, it certainly revealed the vast inequities with regard to broadband and technological needs and access. And, while many of our students were able to engage in a seamless transition, to remote learning, there were yet even millions more that didn't even have the basic infrastructure in place with regard to fiber and technology that's required to engage in remote learning. So I would definitely put money toward making significant improvements and, increasing broadband and just, fiber and just technology associated with that. As well as, I would say, in addition to technology, we cannot forget that there also just needs to be this, make sure that we take those funds to invest in a robust cybersecurity infrastructure. We have so many of our school districts across the country that are constantly, being attacked by ransomware attacks. Well, take that money to ramp up, your cybersecurity, infrastructure as well. It's just not about the broadband or, connectivity, but how do you, lock down some of your networks and just strengthen, your cybersecurity infrastructure for sure. And I think, I don't know if it was Susan or Sherita may have already mentioned, the whole social and emotional piece. We have to be able to address the mental health toll that, our students have had from the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, it is immense. So certainly we want to make sure that we, invest in, our and mental health supports, and interventions that are necessary. But one thing that I know we did not have prior to the pandemic is that we need to make sure that we implement HIPAA and FERPA compliant virtual and remote platforms for the delivery of our counseling services. I mean, you can certainly sit on your own sofa. You don't have to go into somebody's office, if you will, for those services. And then finally, I would, ensure or suggest that we also, focus on the professional learning that I think Sherita had mentioned as well.
Don, if I'm not mistaken, so the ESSER 3 is part. I mean, you worked also on ESSER 2, and I really liked how your frameworks to get to solutions or proposals around involving certain stakeholders. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, so Joe, I did have the pleasure of working with the DOE team here to provide guidance to our LEAs as to how we will spend, our ESSER 2 funds. Again, we're providing guidance. But I did have to certainly add, that we focus efforts on, expansion of STEM and CS, as well as for us in Alabama, there is an emphasis on middle grades expansion with regard to STEM and just career tech in general, to grow the programming in the middle grades level. So I was able to contribute in that way, and will hopefully be able to offer similar guidance when we start fleshing out, guidance for the ESSER 3 funds as well.
Amazing. Can I invite our panelists, if you would like to ask more questions to Don, or if that made you think of something that you would like to add? Briana, you're raising your hand.
Eager to jump in here. First of all, I just want to echo what Don mentioned about not squandering this opportunity. And I feel like that is just such a critical point to drive home right now. And I would add, this is not just a financial opportunity, but this is an opportunity for innovation and to reinvent what school looks like for students. The system that was in place prior to COVID was already not working for every single student. And obviously virtual learning is not working for every single student, and we're seeing gaps. But there's also pockets of innovation out there. And so I just encourage everyone to really take a critical eye to that and think about how to use these funds in a way that doesn't just bring everybody back to how things were running prior to COVID. I really think this is a unique opportunity. This is a unique time for us to really think about what could be and how we can best serve every single student. And I think, like Don said, the infrastructure is probably the first place to start with that. But then beyond that, what else could we do? How else can we really move the needle with this unique opportunity that we have?
It's amazing. Thanks. Thanks a lot. And we've got Sherita raising her hand.
Yes, I love that idea of not just doing the same things. It even makes me kind of reflect back on my use of the words assessment and high quality, not only instructional resources, but just practices. And I think about, Don, when you talk about STEM and CS, an opportunity to really, bring that to the forefront here in Alabama, but what it also does from a social emotional learning standpoint, that collaboration, just imagining being virtual. I'm not in that situation in my district where we're completely virtual, but it opens up opportunities for students to be able to engage with other students and collaborate and develop some skills that possibly, they were not fully able to express if they were virtual or, part-time. So I think that's huge. And also kind of re-examining our idea of what assessment looks like. Assessment does not always have to be some type of standardized test that we see typically at the end of the year, but really bringing along task in just the way that we structure and design our classroom to allow students to be able to collaborate. And I think that's going to to be a benefit on a social emotional learning level. And then it will also be a benefit academically to being able to learn. So that's really taking those more formal words that like just fit in the box of what education has been like, but trying to reimagine what that looks like from an innovation standpoint. So I'm so glad for you to bring that up, Briana, and also done with the emphasis on computer science and STEM, because it opens up a lot of possibilities.
Thank you, Briana, and thank you, Sherita, for sharing your feedback and questions. That's really, really awesome. Anthony, I'd love to ask you the following question. What steps can be taken to utilize these funds to help with teacher retention and training specifically?
Sure. So I did notice one question in chat that I will mention, because most of the people on this panel are educators, and educators like to talk in initialisms and acronyms. So there was specifically a question about CS, and that we're referring to computer science initiatives. Don and I are both state leaders within computer science and computing initiatives within our respective states. DOE is Department of Education. Within the ESSER 2 language, you'll see DOE referred to as SEA, which is State Educational Authority. And then LEA, its counterpart, is Local Educational Authority, which are your public school districts or your school districts. So I wanted to answer that just real quick for those who were hearing the acronyms thrown around. But to the question, there's a variety of ways that these funds can be used for teacher recruitment and retention. Yes, the ESSER funds cannot be used necessarily to supplant salary or bonuses or things of that nature, those normal uses of fund. That's not what it's intended for, and that's not typically an allowable use. But there is some wiggle room within that, if it can be, and wiggle may not be the best word, because that but allowable use for those funds within that, if it can be tied to COVID response, or it can be tied to an ongoing effect of the pandemic within a school district. So for example, if a local school needs to ramp up teacher capacity because of their COVID pandemic response implementation plan, then yes, they can utilize some of those funds in that manner. I would suggest, there was another question earlier about how schools can access these funds or how they can apply these funds. The funding went to your state educational authority, your DOE, and you can apply for grants. Your LEA can apply for allocation of that. Out of all the money that ESSER money that your state received, 90% has to be provided to LEAs. The state can only utilize up to 10% of that for state-driven initiatives. And that was really kind of why I was invited to talk, was to discuss what we're looking at as some of our state initiatives, particularly within the CS. Arkansas received a little over $128 million in ESSER 2 funding, which means that we have about $12.8 million. The Secretary of Education and our leadership and our committee that set our priorities as a state identified 4 areas of focus. One of those is direct student support and continuous learning opportunities, which include professional development and can include academies as authorized under ESSER of 1965. So because ESSER funds can be used for any purpose that was under ESSER of 1965. So it's almost a reauthorization of funding. However, what we looked at for the computer science usage, the Secretary of Education set aside $2.5 million for us to establish a computer science and computing educator academy. So this summer we have opened up, we are now actually taking applications to be part of that, a 90-hour training that really, we didn't look at it from a typical training model. We tried to allow for some flexibility, not only getting teachers certified in CS and getting them that base knowledge to teach computer science and computing concepts, which we go beyond just programming, well beyond programming in our computer science and computing initiative, but also upper level concepts that they have a choice of how they can navigate. So a lot of our funding in that is being utilized to provide the teachers with graduate level credits. It's not just going into training pockets. It's actually the training portion of it. My team's actually providing under our existing funding But the money that's being used is to provide the teachers that are going through this academy with graduate level hours and other benefits to them. So that's one of our items that we're using, but LEAs have a whole long list of ways that they can use this funding. I think it's, I believe it's section 18003D of Division B of the CARES Act, if you want to go look at those 16 areas. But there are ways that those can be used and a lot of resources out there for you to find those.
Anthony, tell us, I mean, it's absolutely amazing to see the initiatives that you're able to offer your teaching population. I mean, I want to sneak into, I mean, now that I've got my visa, I might see if I can get some of that professional development. But I mean, jokes aside, what led you to you having this ability to create such a I want to say sophisticated, but sophisticated kind of seems difficult. I mean, really in-depth, comprehensive a proposition for your teaching population.
So obviously our computer science initiative, and no offense to other states out there, but our initiative is recognized as the leading computer science education initiative across the nation. We have had this, we have had a statewide focus on this since 2015, since Governor Hutchinson came into office. It continues to be. So that was a major reason that a significant portion of this ESSER 2 funding was placed behind the computer science and computing initiative to grow these teachers. And the reason for that, a lot of people say, well, what does computer science have to do with COVID? Well, it's not just computer science as far as in programming, it's computer science and computing. And look at the majority of the state's responses, not only within the educational sector, but within the industrial sector. What did, I told somebody the other day, 90% of our population over the past year got a crash course in what bandwidth means, what cybersecurity really can, how that can affect them, and what they should know in that, what it means, what it means to have stable internet at home when you're trying to do 2 Zooms and parents working from home and kids trying to connect with their teachers. So the computer science and computing initiative and the direct relationship with COVID and preparation, not only response to COVID, but preparation for in case we have another instance like this that hits our nation, God forbid, on a mass level, is that we have to be better prepared as a nation, as an educational, as educational leaders, to support our students and have a population that is ready to step into these digital roles and have the knowledge to be better prepared and utilize those resources than we found ourselves last April. So, we've been able to do what we've done in Arkansas because we have great leaders with Governor Hutchinson, Secretary Key, that have put the emphasis behind this initiative because they see it not only as an educational benefit for our students, but also they see it as an economic must, not even benefit anymore, an economic must for Arkansas.
Thank you, Anthony. I'd love to invite our panelists for any reactions or any questions to what Anthony just shared with us. I'll quickly jump in. Anthony, when we spoke, I was really impressed with the emphasis that was put in computer science, the channels of communication that were opened to you, and also the candor that was allowed to occur between educators in Arkansas. And it felt very healthy. It felt very very open, and also with a kind of humility and openness of mind that I think only can only create good dialogue. Thanks a lot for sharing that with us today. I want to shift over to Briana. Briana, I would love to know from your perspective, how might educators engage with parents specifically to leverage the use of these funds? And why parents?
I'll start there. So why parents? I think over the last year and a half, I myself am a parent, and we have almost been forced into this role of co-teacher. And I think back on, March or April, and remember all those funny memes that were coming out about how teachers should be paid $1 billion. And I agree with that, they should. But parents really got an opportunity to see the hard work that goes behind educating a child. And so I think right now, going back to key moments in time, this is another key moment to really leverage what parents can do in terms of being a part of the educational community. And so parents are now able to speak to, for the most part, what is working for their child in terms of their learning. What do their children need? What do they need as a family? What kind of supports? There's, as it has been mentioned, there's going to be social and emotional learning supports that need to be attended to when students return to the classroom. And so I think parents need to be key collaborators in deciding how these funds are used so that we don't go back into the situation we were in beforehand, where only certain populations of students were having their needs met. So really leveraging parents as not just co-teachers, but as decision makers, and really turning schools into places where there's community that is involved with the decisions that are being made. In turn, I would also say, some of the investment needs to go into parents. And I don't think we want to get rid of parents as co-teachers. I think that's just such a great resource to have. And some of these funds could potentially be used to continue to train parents and teach them, things like the science of reading, particular things for the lower grade levels that are, so those formative years are so important. And to really empower parents as co-teachers, whether it's, in a continued virtual environment or at home now. I really think this is a unique opportunity to leverage what they have to offer.
And really, as you say, I mean, long may it last that people finally realize how much teachers deserve to earn, and how much work and dedication and perseverance it requires on all levels. But if I understand things correctly, from your perspective, it's a key opportunity. The parents are at the most empathetic, at the most open to communication with teachers, and now is the right time to continue to nurture that and invest in that. Is that correct?
I believe so. I think as a previous educator, I'm still an educator, but working at a school before my role at Teach for America, we struggled to figure out how to authentically involve parents. And especially being at a high school, that was even more difficult. And I think right now is a unique opportunity to find those unique ways to get them involved that is, outside of them making a bulletin board or helping teachers make copies. I really think there is a unique opportunity right now to authentically bring them into their children's education and to help make decisions at the campus level and at the district level as well.
I love that angle. Any thoughts? Any thoughts from the rest of our panel regarding the involvement of parents? Any country opinion, perhaps? Is that silence for agreement, or some further thoughts?
Well, Joe, I'll jump in there real quick and just, it'll probably be an echo of a lot of what Briana said. I think that, if you try to look for a silver lining in the pandemic, we know it was horrible, and we don't want to, belittle the damage that is done to families and economies and personal lives. However, if you try to find some positive out of it, I think your parents are going to come out of this pandemic potentially with a lot stronger respect for what teachers do within the classroom. And I think that's going to translate into a connection with those teachers as those students start transitioning back to the classroom, a better connection, also hopefully an increased interest in the activities of those students within the classroom. So I go back to something that was said earlier about not squandering the opportunity. My statement to educators out there would be, don't squander this opportunity of that fresh connection with parents coming off of this year of that they've year plus basically, that a lot of them have been responsible for more responsible. They've always been responsible, but more responsible for the education of their children and more in tune with it because they're doing it right there under their vision and more involved. So I think the parental engagement, if we look at a silver lining of the pandemic, is potentially our educators have a better opportunity now to really make meaningful parental engagement after the pandemic that was not in place before.
Thank you. That was well spoken, Anthony. I'll move on to the last question to a panelist, and then we'll go a panel-wide question. And I will direct this question to Susan. Susan, we spoke a lot about the history of funding, like ESSER, although this is quite unique. But from what you have seen, from what you have experienced and studied, what do you think will be some of the long-term effects across the stakeholder spectrum of this historical funding?
Well, let's hope there are long-term effects. We haven't always seen that. In the 1970s, when states were trying to equalize funding among districts, because what districts spent was very, very dependent on local property wealth, still is. That effort to equalize has not been completely successful. But during that period, states began to spend a lot more money, and we actually did see intergenerational effects in lessening poverty and increasing student achievement. But we have a much more recent example of a big infusion at the beginning of the Obama administration, Race to the Top, in the last decade, where there was a time limit on spending the funds, and the projection for their use was to do things that required a lot of time for development, new curriculum, new assessments, and the funds had to be spent before all that developmental work could be done. And I think there was a rush to spend them, and a big backlash for many reasons, but it's hard to argue that it had the kind of long-term effect that it might have. So with a big infusion like this, it's important to think about what can be done for the long term. And I'm so encouraged by hearing my colleagues on the panel talk about professional development and working with parents and investing in social and emotional learning, and not in buying products, which could be, the money could be spent immediately, and then you have a new package for STEM or whatever it is. And that would not necessarily guarantee any kind of long-term effect. You can't buy your way into achievement. Of course, you can invest in materials and products. That's a good use of an infusion of funds, but that has to be paired with an understanding of how each product should best be used, what kind of instructional supports, how you can support teachers in their use, what extra help students might need, a whole set of services around introducing new materials. And then, of course, systems to monitor them over time and to see if they need to be improved and if their use is turning out to be effective. So I'm very encouraged by this discussion, because people are thinking about things that could potentially mean long-term improvement.
Thanks a lot, Susan. And it sends me back to maybe, if I remember correctly, Sherita, that was your point, and it was echoed. I believe that no one wants to squander this opportunity. It's a unique opportunity, and there's this tension, this human desire to try things out, which is good. Which we've said, let's not go back to the status quo. Let's use this as an opportunity. But then there's a tension that's built in some of the short-term deadlines to make a decision. What do you think is the best framework to ensure that, well, we give the most potential to see long-term effects, whilst giving ourselves the freedom of mind to try things out for lowest risk and highest reward? I guess I'll rephrase my question. Susan, in your opinion, what can we do to ensure that in terms of how, the manner in which we spend? You mentioned professional development, but I could go tomorrow and decide to spend all my money on just one professional development service provider. Would that be the kind of thing that you would then recommend? I think you're on mute. Sorry, you're on mute.
Whatever you do, whether you're buying materials or you're buying professional development programs, whatever resources you are attaining, you need to pair that work with research and monitoring. First of all, we should search for products, for programs that are research-based, that have an actual basis in what we know about student learning. And then we should make sure that these materials and products and programs have appropriate ways of monitoring them incorporated, that they have analytics that tell you whether students are actually engaged when they're working with them, that they have ways of measuring the progress, that built into their work is a constant desire to reevaluate and to assure best use and effectiveness. And this might mean pairing with outside researchers, with nonprofits or universities. It's always good to get an outside opinion, but it certainly means being careful and being incremental, which is difficult in a time of a huge opportunity of funds that come all at once. But if it's structured carefully, so your investments build upon each other, upon knowledge that you're gaining in the initial steps, I think it has the best chance of success.
Incremental. Sherita, yes, please.
Because that, just to ditto everything that she just mentioned, because from experience and evidence that when you do the things that she mentioned, it actually works. I alluded to the fact that we saw growth in our literacy. And I attribute that to long-term incremental focus on instructional best practices. And in terms of professional development, I firmly believe that the best professional development is job embedded professional development. And ways to make that happen is to be able to structure the school day so that teachers can collaborate with one another. Yes, you might have outside professional providers come in, but when you have consistently teachers collaborating in a job embedded environment, you're able to see that work go through. And you even mentioned maybe outside researchers. There's previous funds which came mentioned in terms of principal support, being able to have coaches of principals to be able to sustain that work for when the funds are no longer there, and being able to keep the implementation stronger and stronger. So I just have to say that you are spot on, that here in my school district, based on the incremental work over years' time, that it is proven to work. And I even think that in this COVID era, post-COVID, that we'll continue to see that. And hopefully these funds will be able to provide that opportunity to more school systems across the nation.
Joe, can I jump in just real quick?
Please do.
So Ms. Hayes, I think she had some great points there, and she got to some kind of hit around the edge of some of the things that how we operate our initiative, and just something that I want to say to individuals that are in decision places of decision of how these funds are used. First, I will say, I won't come out and say do not look at vendors or products, but I will say look at vendors and products as a way to support your primary investment, which should be in your local people, your local expertise, and building your local capacity. And that's one reason our initiative has been successful. Yes, we do have some great partnerships with some vendors such as Learning Blade, Forge Institute, and some other entities out there that provide support to our state initiative, but the vast majority of our funding within our state is developing capacity amongst my team, developing capacity amongst teachers. And the reason that I, in my leadership role, decided to take that route is I'm not too far removed from the classroom. And I remember being in the classroom and the district coming to me as a teacher during the summer and saying, we've got this new great thing that we've bought. or has been bought for us, and we're going to spend all this time and effort and energy training on it, getting all our teachers involved in it, and it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And 2 years later, the funding for that is gone, and guess what? We're no longer doing it, and we're moved to something else that there's funding for. And I refuse to do that to my computer science and computing teachers across Arkansas. I would rather invest in people and capacity. So if the funding for my initiative dries up or goes away, then I've built that stake within our state and within our people, and it's not tied to a product, because that was always so infuriating as a teacher within the classroom. It was just a constant cycle of what's next. So don't use this funding for what's next. Use this funding for long-term, what Susan was getting at.
How we can, the best way to, I mean, as we discussed, incrementally doing research on evidence and research-based services or solutions or providers who are able to have that conversation, and we've got that long-term commitment. And if in doubt, and even when not in doubt, investing in people, building the knowledge. Things, things may malfunction, and some products may wear out. People and knowledge can be shared, and you create an amazing community around it. Anthony, thanks so much for this. I'm going to quickly jump. This panel, I have to say, has been amazing in keeping all the attendees to this panel. Everyone is very engaged. We've got lots of questions coming in. Before we jump into the Q&A, I want to issue a challenge to our panelists. You've already alluded to in some of your answers, but if you could, in one sentence, share one action item that a teacher can take right now to influence this spending for good. And I'll leave it to you to start, and please feel free to share yours after the first person starts. So the question is, in one sentence, what is one action item that a teacher can take right now to influence his spending for good? And you know what? I'll choose Briana. What do you think?
I would say, as a teacher, the one thing that I would start doing right now is gathering some data to be ready to advocate to your administrators what it is that you need, what development do you need, what are your ideas for using some of those monies, and advocate for them with your administrator. I think administrators oftentimes make last-minute decisions because deadlines are real and you lose money if you don't submit ideas. And so by getting a head start and just telling your administrators as soon as possible, I have some ideas about how we can use some of these funds, you're really making the job easier for them, and it's likely that your idea might get picked up. But I suggest that you have some actual data behind that to prove that it's a good investment. And one of the themes that I've picked up from some of the other panelists and some of the discussion we've had is to really think about sustainability and think about how using funds with whatever your suggestion is going to go beyond just buying a product or a service, but how is it going to be something that becomes a systemic change or a sustainable change?
That was awesome, Sherita. Briana, and I was saying Sherita because I want to popcorn to Sherita yeah.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. From just communicate your needs, communicate those needs, and I truly would suggest communicating them from the standpoint of the students. Personally, the teacher came to me, has needs from the perspective of the students. There's no way that I would have to not consider and have some thorough thought about that. If you have an idea, that would be great, but if not, but communicating needs from the standpoint of the student is key to me.
Thanks. Over to you, Susan.
Well, let me just add, because you would expect it of a researcher, that whatever you advocate for should be grounded in research. And I think this was implied, not just in data about your students' needs, but in what we know about the availability of different approaches to meet those needs and what we know about their relative success. We should be grounding our decisions in the learning sciences and what we know about learning and how to best promote it.
And may I just add, if the research is not obvious, maybe and you have a provider, maybe just send a question, and that might tell you, send a question to them. That might give a few things away. How accessible are they? How willing are they to really partner? They may be a big company, but actually quite effusive or not really involved. They may be, or they may be small and be able to give that information and give you the research based, or vice versa. You may have small companies with whom you would expect that continuous dialogue, but who may not be able to get their act together and reply to you in time. So ask fire away a question to them and see what the response is, and ask them about the research and see how they respond. Thanks a lot, Susan. Over to you, Don.
Yes, certainly from a policymaking standpoint, as well as a decision-making standpoint as well. We definitely have to take a very targeted approach, if you will, to scale up efforts. And I also saw in the chat that can, like, your gifted students be included in these efforts. Absolutely. Everything that was captured or currently, housed under our Elementary and Secondary Education Act now, those are considered allowable. And again, we're talking everything from, programs around early childhood education, career and technical education, programs that prepare, our K-12 students for those in-demand, fields, as well as, assistive technologies for our special needs students, and increasing enrollment or providing transportation to and from, these summer learning opportunities. So again, everything that was, like I said, couched under, our Elementary and Secondary Education Act are considered allowable expenses for ESSER 2 and 3 funding. I would also echo one of the other panelists, that we survey our students, because our students have some great ideas with regard to how, not only how, the pandemic has impacted them, but also these, especially, our students are in tune with themselves, if you will, especially the social and emotional side. And I want to give you an example. We just recently held our Governor's Computer Science Summit. And one of the high school developers actually created an app around social and around mental health, basically. And, that really just blew the judges away. It blew, the audience away, that they were, again, that in tune to how the pandemic has impacted them, and what, again, that young person went, so far to even start researching, services and, how to overcome, some of those deficits, if you will. But again, survey your students. That would be a good, activity for them if you're in the classroom, because again, they are so much in tune to how this has impacted them. And they just have great ideas, even around innovation, if you will, that, we as educators may not even be thinking about.
I love that. So serving students and really involving all stakeholders. That's really, really great. Thank you, Don. And to close up this, question to the panel before we move on to Q&A, we've got some amazing questions. Anthony, over to you.
And I know we're getting short on time, so I'll just add a few brief thoughts on this. I can't speak for all the states, but I would assume that most all states are going to follow the model that LEAs, as they are, local educational authorities, school districts, as they apply for funding through this funding through their state agencies, that the state agency is going to want to see a plan and a thought out plan. And part of that plan should be pulling together stakeholder groups. So I would suggest reaching out, finding out what entity is setting up that stakeholder group, to the teachers that are out there wondering what they can do. Try to leverage to get yourself on that stakeholder group, but not only do that, talk to your fellow teachers. it's so much different than one teacher going to an administrator and saying, I think we should do this, to a department going to an administrator or a whole grade level or a whole school and saying, I think this is what we should do. And Susan mentioned research earlier. Our nation is going to have to crawl back out from the economic crisis that we see a lot of states in. And that translates to communities. And guess what? Your superintendent, it should be one of the biggest advocates of your community's economic base of anybody in the town. They should be more worried about the economic base than your chamber president. So if you can go to them and you can show them how this funding use ties to economic growth or continuation of economic industry within your community and supports that economic industry, so you can start your communities crawl back out from the situation we find ourselves in. If they have any sense about them whatsoever, they'll listen to that.
Thanks a lot, Anthony. We're getting close to the hour, so I understand we have very little time left, and we understand some of you have other appointments and meetings to attend to. Please feel free to leave now. We just want to make sure that we have at least one question from the Q&A. By the way, everyone in the chat and everyone attending, if you have any more questions specific that haven't been answered, please email us, my colleague and I. I'm jh@samlabs.com. We have ashley@samlabs.com. We'll make sure that we give you as much information as possible. But maybe I'll just start with the first question. It's from Jeff, who's given us a lot of really great questions. A question for Briana. Jeff asked, a great many parents have no experience of online learning because they were essential workers, but not essential enough to have home internet connections. Have you all seen any ideas about how this funding could help those families? What about those who don't speak English?
That is a great question. And I actually just learned about a program in Oakland called The Lab. And it was actually put on by a nonprofit, but I envision that this is something that school districts could possibly do for their parents. And it is a training center where parents were trained on how to use technology, how to troubleshoot internet access, teach them about digital citizenship so that they could then be empowered to help their own children with that as well. And it started off as a volunteer basis and eventually grew enough traction that they had funding to continue this even in a hopefully what is soon to be a post-pandemic world. And again, it is called The Lab, and it is part of the Oakland, it serves the Oakland school district. So I encourage you to check that out. And it was a community with parents who were not native English speakers, who were lower income families, and they were able to set up a structure that really motivated and empowered the parents to be active in their children's learning. So that is one idea that I will put out there.
Thanks a lot, Briana. And just have to let all attendees know, Susan unfortunately had already told us that she had to step out. She apologizes. She would have really liked to stay. And if any of our panelists need to leave, please completely understand. Thanks so much for giving us your time today. It's really an honor to have all of you together. I'll just move on to one more question, and please feel free to drop off if you need to. Anthony, from Monica G, what is the process to apply for this funding, and how long does it take for the application for the funding to be approved?
So, you know, the state educational authorities had to submit our plan and our application to the federal government for our different ESSER authorizations. And obviously that rolls out on the federal timeline. The different states are going to have different places, different processes in place. And I'm kind of, I was typing out a response to a lot of people out there that many of the state departments of education should have or will have a site dedicated to CARES Act funding, including ESSER, and how these different processes work within their state. I've linked to our states. Now, obviously, that's only applicable to Arkansas, but you should be able to find a comparable page on your DOE site, and it will explain the processes for your particular state. And once again, timeframes. You know, there's a federal timeframe within that the SEAs, the state education authorities, must have this 90% delivered to the local education authorities, so it can't be longer than that. The federal government has put an emphasis behind getting this money out to the school districts.
Thank you, Anthony. Thanks so much. And I've got one last question for Don, if that's okay with you, from Bailey. Do you have any books or studies that you recommend to help provide direction as we navigate these changes and start to ideate what that may look like for the next school year?
In terms of what may look like?
Well, I think books and studies that recommend and that could provide direction onto what's next. What's next for us? What's next for education? What's next for teaching?
Yeah, I keep you know, several you know, topics you know, in my library, in my arsenal, and I am happy to put you know, a couple in the chat. But certainly one that definitely comes to mind. Again, it's going to be STEM and CS focused for me, but it is it escapes me. Weapons of Math Destruction. I don't know if people are familiar with that particular you know, book, but also I would say that there is, you know, a lot of research coming out of, we use, you know, a lot of, I guess, research think tanks here at the department, anywhere from, you know, Hunt Institute to the Friday Institute to, you know, the Research Center out of, we have one here in Alabama, of course, associated with University of Alabama. So if it's Alabama specific, I can certainly, you know, pop some things in the chat for you. I don't know if I addressed your question or not.
I mean, sorry for putting you on the
they
spot.
Want Texas
Texas, baby wants
specific.
Texas.
I can't help you with Texas. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'm glad somebody mentioned Coded Bias. Yeah, if you have not seen that particular documentary that came out this past summer, I believe, was it July, if I'm not mistaken, please, please, please make sure that you, you know, take a Saturday afternoon to take a look at that. It brings definitely, you know, biases that are experienced in, you know, the area of artificial intelligence to light. And you would just be, you know, blown away. Obviously, somebody from Sam Lab is saying it's also available on Netflix. So thank you.
And Anthony, I saw you raised your hand.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. My apologies.
Okay.
But regarding studies, you know, reach out to your educational leaders in this space. Education commissions of the states continues to put out information. SREB has some good information on that. Southern Regional Education Board, even if you're not a Southern or SREB state, there's good information there on CARES Act funding. And then once again, I just point you back to your state Department of Education website. I was able to find Texas's information, which was dropped in the chat just through a quick Google search, and just search for ESSER and Texas, and right there. And so a lot of states, you know, this is a lot of funding, and we can only use 10% of it. So we want the other 90% to get out to schools as quickly as we can and as effectively as we can.
Thank you, Anthony, and thank you to the both of you, especially much for staying well beyond our allocated time. We had on the panel, of course, Don Morrison, we had Anthony Owen, but we had Sherita Hayes, Briana Castano, and Susan Fuhrman. Thanks for your time, your generosity, and sharing the knowledge like this. It's been amazing to have you with us. Thanks to all of our attendees. I wish you a great rest to your day, a great evening, afternoon, morning, to all of you attending. Thanks again, Anthony. Thanks again, Don. It's been fantastic.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. And I would also like to join thank our team at Sam Labs for organizing this amazing event and connecting us to the panelists. Thank you, Don. Thank you for staying for that last part as well. And I will wish everyone a great rest to their day. Thanks, everyone.